G'day, cunts. Does anyone remember this, when old mate Vosh called Isaac Butterfield a child groomer but then walked it back? Yeah, Vosh bad, at least on that day. Fella should have stuck to his guns, I reckon, but more on why calling Isaac a child groomer is correct in just a tick. I will quickly say that I don't mean child groomer in a sexual sense, of course, but there are many ways to groom children into many different forms of exploitation, all of which are deeply concerning. You know, stuff like weird religious cults, capitalism, or fascism as the current circumstance implies. Isaac isn't a pedophile, of course, but he's grooming kiddies none the fucking less. Anyway, starting at the beginning, the reason I'm back on Isaac is because I recently made my long-suffering and much better half sit down and watch Isaac's alleged comedy special with me, and we recorded it, planning to edit it down and upload the experience. But it didn't really work out, because there's only so many times I could stand to hear myself or her have the same reaction to the same lame-ass shit. Like, don't get me wrong, there's some unintentionally hilarious bits in there, one of which is worth going over quickly, and that's the intro, which also served as the promo prior to release, and it's essentially a Butterfield fever dream of the sort he'd wake up sticky from. It starts with this shot of people defacing his Joker referencing posters, in which the camera pans across the word cunt instead of showing it in full, which I guess was done to preserve the PG rating? Now, this is weird behaviour for such a brave warrior in the fight against PC culture, but okay. This piece then tells the story of a bunch of vigilantes who for some reason could be bothered protesting Isaac's show, but also make the strange decision to wear Isaac masks while doing it. This all happens before this guy runs away to light this beacon to summon Isaac to his own show, I guess. The protesters then get locked in a storeroom with Isaac and we see this creepy shot, and yeah, just what the fuck was meant to be implied here? Nothing fucking normal, that's for damn sure. But yeah, beyond this notable intro though, which I think was probably notable because Isaac almost certainly brought in help for this bit, the special was mostly just really bad attempts at being offensive, and in all honesty it wasn't even that. Like, no doubt, jokes about gassing Jewish people will upset Jewish people, and rightly so, and if I was in his presence I'd be oh nah mate, that's stupid and fucked up. But as a non-Jewish person I can't really say it's offensive. There's nothing I didn't hear on the playground as a kid, and I stopped thinking it was brave and cheeky when I got out of my 15-year-old edgelord phase. This kind of quote-unquote material is honestly just fucking boring to me now, and I think even the audience at this show started to feel the same way as the proceedings went on. At the start of the show, there's a fair bit of laughter from his crowd of a pearl-clutching, oh my god, he can't really say that, can he, variety. But as it goes on, you can tell even the patrons are starting to get over it, as the laughter is slowly replaced with people just kinda recognising that the joke is edgy, kinda half-laughing at him in response, and that's about it. Well, check out this awkward example.
What can I do for you, God? And God goes, listen, you look like you're panicking. First of all, please take a sip of this and have a sit down. Mary has a sip, she sits down, and God says, listen, Mary, I've come here to give you my seed. By the way, great pickup line for when you're 18. Works every time.
Yeesh. So yeah, look, what Isaac offers in this special, and in his videos, isn't even really offensive comedy. To qualify, it would have to be clever and not just stuff we've all heard 20 years ago and then with actually good delivery. Far then from the heir apparent to history's edgy and offensive comedians, Isaac is just some dickhead. However, it must be acknowledged he is some dickhead with some level of appeal, and well, the butterites would be screaming at me to explain that if they were able. Well, the answer there is perhaps obvious to you lot, but leads us to the main point, because Isaac's appeal is greatly and disturbingly limited to the 12 to 16-year-old boy demographic. For real, which other group of people can still be bothered to care about vegans to the point of actually hating them? More importantly though, and this is perhaps a bit frustrating because I can't reveal my source on this, but I know for a verified fact that Isaac's demographics on YouTube are indeed primarily young teen males. But yeah, this appeal to young boys is of course one reason I titled the video as I did. These facts alone are kind of fucking weird, to be honest. The second reason though is more important, but also a lot more insidious. Bear with me. Isaac starts his special proper with, predictably, lines about gassing Jews and Palestinians blowing up as part of a long and certainly fabricated monologue, a monologue about a Jewish fan whose hypocrisy around who Isaac is apparently allowed to pick on is incorrectly held up as an excuse to be a cunt about all minorities and vulnerable folk. It's pretty dumb, but he soon drops the classic excuse. It's all just jokes. And well, look, a lot of this has been said before, but I need to say it again. That hasn't washed as an excuse for some time. Since the meme lords killed Heather Heyer, since the Christchurch shooter in his manifesto used the same lines and memes that these blokes do, Christchurch being an incident Isaac seems pretty keen to discuss and clear himself around, just FYI, but yeah, this shit has not been anything close to adequate all by itself. But this becomes doubly true when the politics you engage in outside of your alleged comedy is so in line with what you profess to not believe and just be joking about. Like Count Dankula, doesn't get to say it's all just jokes when he runs for the White Nationalist Party, now does he? Similarly, Isaac doesn't get to say it's all just jokes when fascist little fucks like Avi Yemeni get a spot in his podcast. And now we're approaching the point again. Because look, Avi, the little grifter who's been convicted of bashing women, was welcome amongst white nationalist types for a long time. This was true until the ever-shifting attitudes of what these wankers are willing to tolerate, in this case so they could demonise Africans and Muslims more effectively, eventually and inevitably led to them saying the JQ shit out loud again. And at that point, even a handy former member of the IDF and bona fide Muslim hater was no longer a desired tool in their proverbial belt. And yeah, you'll remember this from the start. It's kind of topical to point out that this band of knobs willing to tolerate Avi once included Tom Sewell of the National Socialist Network and recent infamy, who has been heavily engaged in taking these young boys, primed by the just jokes of men like Isaac, and further indoctrinating them into becoming literal Nazis. Now, I'm not suggesting, of course, that Isaac is deliberately engaged in a plot to win young boy converts for the NSN or whoever. If nothing else, he just isn't that fucking smart. What he is engaged in, though, is the early stages of the indoctrination process for these very young boys along some very dangerous paths, and I think even he understands it on some level. Note yet again how eager he is to make sure everyone knows he thinks Christchurch was a bad thing, before dropping a line about the attack meaning all of the city's cabbies are dead. Isaac is also, though, whether he knows or accepts it or not, directly engaged in the politics that often lie behind these just jokes. And look, that should be a red flag all on its own, but when the degrees of separation between you and the fucking NSN are so few, anyone with an ounce of intelligence or sense of responsibility would do something about that now, wouldn't they? And you'd hope it'd be a little more than just saying Christchurch bad before going about the same shit that leads little boys into the politics of the guy who fucking did it. Which is, shockingly, also the same shit that certain scumbag engaged in while murdering those 52 people you want us to think you care about. So, yeah, he's not offensive in my eyes. He's certainly not the face of hate. What he is a dumbass and a fairly standard bigot who's so cringy that he thinks he's alternately the literal Joker or Ned Kelly. Now that could be ignored, but the problem is that by appealing to very young boys with the same crap that actual fascists use, and by exposing them to very adjacent politics, he's made himself into part of the pipeline of child grooming for fascists. And he's therefore a child groomer himself. Laters.